All right, so here's what we're going to do. We have about 20 minutes, 25 minutes before we lose. Amy's got another engagement she's going to have to run off to. But I'd like to try to make this interactive. Now, I wrote down a few questions for myself, and Lindy was nice enough to print it out in big letters because she knows my eyes aren't great, so I appreciate that. But if you have questions, just raise a hand, and we'll get you involved in the conversation. It's a lot more interesting, these panel discussions, when it really is a conversation. But I'm going to start with Amy, because before I joined Armanino 7 years ago, I was involved in a startup. I mean, that was one of the best experiences of my life, one of the most difficult experiences in my life, and you've been involved with a few now. So, as it relates to kind of systems and processes, what we were talking about before, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've kind of encountered as you've gone through this startup phase and are working to build a company? What are just some, I know there's probably quite a few, but just some of the top ones that come to mind.
The first one is getting the level of understanding with your staff. Let me know if this works. The first one's getting the level of understanding with your staff, because it's difficult to implement a process or a system if everyone around you is a new, fresh, young face that hasn't had a lot of experience in business. Sure. So there's a process element to it, and clearly coaching around what those processes and controls are, particularly controls. In a startup, I was number 6 at Grubhub, everybody's your best friend. But as you start to layer in controls and you start to have rules, you start to lose friends, and you have to figure out a way to make that work so you can still work together. And I handle that glibly, but it's not glib at all. That's probably the biggest struggle. The second one is going in and finding someone to help you that's not just trying to sell you something. And I'm not saying that because you're at arm's length and I want more wine, although I do. But you have to have somebody that truly gets what you're doing and what you're working with. A lot of very bright people at Grubhub, a lot of very bright people at Sim Partners, but we're not going to be able to iterate the most expert level, here's what my system does. So if you come to my team and start talking to me up here, we're going to stop that conversation and come to one where we can all understand what we're talking about. Same thing on the tech side. You've got usually resource-constrained tech resources. So at Grubhub, we had to build an integration into Intact, so that took some of the tech people away. They're already working 80 hours a week, so going in and trying to get them to do one more thing so that I can count the money is another thing you have to work on and get their level of understanding up. And I think we did that very well. I think we did that very well with Lindy and her team. Those are probably the two.
What were some of the systems that you were on that you were outgrowing, and what were you kind of considering moving to when you went through these processes?
We were almost pre-Google Docs at Grubhub. We were kind of in the Abacus Excel world. And we had a report that came out of the operating system that was vague, but we used that to close our books every month. So literally, as we were implementing Intact, my QuickBooks application, which was desktop at that time, was literally collapsing. So simultaneously with the implementation of Intact, I had to re-implement a new version of QuickBooks to hold it together enough to get the board reporting out. Because we did all this post-Series C, when you have bigger investors expecting bigger reporting and bigger standard level of information.
Right.
So yes, QuickBooks, an Abacus, and Excel. And I have to say, it was kind of the same thing with Google Docs at Sim Partners. And everybody had their own Google Doc, and Selena and Nancy can attest to this. And the Google Docs sometimes rhymed with each other, and sometimes they were completely different.
Yeah.
So.
Are you still there? All right.
I got it.
You might have lost it. Okay. It worked for a little bit.
Yeah.
Throw it over the edge.
Okay, so I'm gonna come back to some of the systems you moved to and how that's going for you. But before we do, when I ask CFOs about this becoming more strategic thing and getting out behind the green visor, they usually say that's easy enough. I just need to hire a guy like Todd.
I'm the CFO of Care, and you are more accurate.
That's what it really comes down to. So Todd, let's pick on you for a minute here, and your role then as controller. And we had the pleasure of some of our team members working with you originally on adaptive planning and then Intact. Kind of walk us through what your role is in those types of projects. What has it been?
Kind of lucky because I get really involved at the beginning and in the system selection process, but then once we do make a choice, I get to kind of just sit back a little bit and just make sure it's going well, and then the rest of the team has to execute on it. But involved in like understanding what our issues are. Just for some of the background too of the technology we were coming from, QuickBooks, Excel for reporting. We're struggling with a lot of things in billing. Billing was almost like we had done a lot of automation in Salesforce, but when it came time to actually creating invoices, creating them accurately, getting them out the door, it was all manual, and we were spending a lot of time on that. As the business grew, you go from 4 or 5 departments with no sub-departments to 6, 7 departments with everyone wants to have the sub-department for everything, and it just kills your budgeting, forecasting, reporting process because you can't scale with it. So we're definitely looking for a new solution there too. And like I said, in my role, very, very involved in the search, the selection, and then just kind of like overseeing the execution and implementation of it, and then taking all the credit for it when it goes well.
True, Keith? Is that true statement?
The team's shaking there.
He gives all the credit to his staff who does all the hard work. I just let Todd stay.
All right. So, any questions so far? I'll let you jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rolling here. Raise your hand and stop me. Otherwise, one of the questions I often get from finance executives is, boy, there's a kind of a hit parade of things I'd love to do, but how am I going to go about convincing others within the business? How do I build the business case? How do I build the support for the projects that I think are most important? And I got to tell you this, and CFOs in the room probably will acknowledge it. Many CFO organizations are like the cobbler's children without shoes. It's a badge of honor with many CFOs not to spend too much money on their own organization, and it's a mistake. It's a mistake because CFOs, by and large, have a better idea of the top opportunities to drive improvement in the business, certainly from a back office standpoint, than anybody. And so there's this role of having to advocate and build support for the good ideas. And you guys clearly have done it. What's the trick? How do you do it? How do you go and build the business case and support for the things you care most about?
Well, for me, it was easy. Everyone else is going to CEO, CFO and saying, I need to hire people. I just got to go and say, I just need a check. That's all you need to do is give me a check and we'll take care of the rest. But really, I mean, that actually was part of it. But the other part of it is you're faced with a situation where, okay, I can hire 2 to 4 more people, or we can make this, in the grand scheme of things, is a really reasonable investment in technology, and this is going to set us up, for the long term here. These are applications that will scale with us. So it really, and the last thing I would say is like, we don't need any IT help. We can administer this thing ourselves. It's not going to take any resources outside of our team. So it was a really easy sell for us.
The second one was an easy sell. I was hired, and I think part of this is because of where and how I was hired. If you're hired in as your CFO, there's a set of expectation on decisions you're going to make, and you're going to be at the table doing certain things. At Grubhub, I was hired more like 2 days a week, and so that expectation and building that camaraderie to get things done happened very differently there. But in general, I think if you have some foresight in where a company's going to scale, if you've done this once before, it helps, because then you can say, this is happening now, and I bet you in 3 months we're going to see this, in 6 months we're going to see this, in 12 months we're going to see this. So we need to be ready for this ramp up, and that applies to really anything in operations, whether you're scaling the business to handle invoicing or scaling the business to handle revenue recognition or whatever it might be. So having that dialogue early, saying we don't need it now, but it's coming, so it's not a surprise, is always very helpful. And then the second piece, we've all probably been on the call where you've made your final selection and the competitors all start calling your board to tell them about how bad your decision was. We had some of that too. So by getting those people prepped and ready before, those calls go unanswered, so you don't have that kind of stuff. That kind of did it for us.
Yeah.
I think Amy really did hit something on the head there. we've had the great privilege over the last number of years. I think over the last 5 years, Armanino has worked on about 2/3 of the companies that have gone public in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley companies. We've been able to work on their IPOs. Full range of IPO readiness activities and helping them gear up for a successful IPO. But time and time again, what I will tell you, we see is companies that ran the business a certain way, which was kind of minimizing in many cases cost invested in systems and process, focused on building the go-to-market, obviously product development, sales, marketing, and then they hit the inflection point. And the inflection point is the business model really starts to work. And now they got to work to keep up with it. And so I think what I heard you say is it's about seeing around the bend. And where do we want to be 6 months from now? Where do we think we're going to be 6 months from now? And selling the vision for that. And maybe even saying these aren't things we have to do today, but when we hit these various milestones, we got to be prepared to do it. So it's kind of pre-selling the idea, so when the business starts to get to the right points where the business case is there, you've brought people along with you. I think that is a really good message. So Todd and I earlier today, I asked him, I said, how's business going? And he said, it's going great. And he said, well, of course, you know Matt from having built a startup company and run it. There's always issues you're working on, always challenges. In fact, I used to tell people that worked with me, they'd say, Matt, if we just get through the next 6 months, the problems we have right now, everything's going to be easy. And I said, that just means you've never built a company before, because the problems just change. They just get bigger or different. And so my question for both of you is, talk to us a little bit about some of the current challenges you're dealing with today. Maybe another way of asking you is, if I gave you $1 million and you get to go and take on a project you really would like to work on today, challenges you're dealing with, and what's kind of next for you in terms of projects you're thinking about?
I get to start with this one, huh? Well, this wouldn't take $1 million, not even close to $1 million, but we I think now that we've got 4 or 5 cloud solutions now that we've implemented, and they're hooked together and they're playing nicely together, but we're not getting the most that they have to offer. It's kind of you implement it and you got mission critical running. You get a sense of it's doing some really cool stuff, saved you time, but then it's on to the next major project. So what I would like to do, and what we're trying to do this summer, we get a couple interns in there, is to free up our team's time to know the systems the best, so that they can focus on doing some R&D work with these applications, figure out what the application offers that we're not using, and actually start thinking ahead and planning, like the next, for us, will be the next 1 to 3 years of what we're going to do with the applications. And that's really, wouldn't even be close to $1 million, man.
So I would say that's very reflective of where the market is today. Anybody that's been paying attention to the cloud industry, if you're in it directly, we are living in such a time of rapid development. It's amazing. It was a few short years ago that people were talking about data centers and security, and then it was, why wouldn't I deploy a cloud solution? And today, the conversation is, how do I get the most value out of this? What are the best practices? What are companies doing to fully integrate the investments they've made in cloud? What are they doing about workflow? How are business processes really flowing through various critical applications? I will tell you, Ryan, where are you? Raise your hand back there. An unsolicited plug here, but Ryan joined our team a number of years ago because what we always prided ourselves on doing was helping clients come up with a strategy and architecture for the cloud, and we'd help them implement the solution successfully. Well, today, what our clients are saying, that's not enough. We need help from an integration standpoint. We got to be able to pull these things together to get the most value out of them. And so I think that sounds like what you're dealing with.
It's the flip, I think, of the on-premise solutions. They used to be way behind in the features that they were putting out and the functionality. It's the opposite now, where the Intacts, the Adaptives, Nexonias, they're all 2 or 3 steps ahead, I think, of where their customers are, and we're playing catch up. I'd much rather have it that way than how it used to be, like I guess a decade ago. But I think that's definitely true. We're definitely seeing that.
Yeah, well, again, today we are doing more and more pre-built connectors between these systems and integration than ever before, and I think it's because a lot of people like you are looking at it and saying, I've got all this there, what's the next phase of kind of business process improvement, productivity gain within the architecture that you've already invested in? Amy, how about you?
I think it's very similar. We did an integration. We have Intact, and we've taken over the controls. We've rolled out Nexonia, and we're handling all of our expense time off and all that. Now turning our attention to a scalable sales model. We've built the integration with Salesforce. We've gone through the first round of creating a sales ops group. Now building that out and really growing that. We have Marketo as well, so trying to get that whole start to finish sales cycle in a very configurable and scalable way defined, so that I can look at it and say what's moving along through the pipeline, what stage, etc., so that we can then forecast and predict out and tell our board, this is what I'm going to bring home this year. Those kind of conversations.
Okay, I want to pick up on that, because earlier I said you got to be a great communicator if you're going to be a controller or CFO that gets your projects supported by others and funded. Well, that's the front end of it. The back end of it, for people that come to me within our organization, they convince me of a good idea, I say, great, but then I want to hold them accountable, right? I want to know what the actual results were. So you talked about the abacus and the Excel spreadsheets. Well, now you've deployed Intact, and I'm totally biased because I love Intact, and we're one of their largest partners. Tell me about what are the real tangible business benefits that you're seeing today, having moved away from the abacus. What is Intact doing for you that's driving real business value that you could articulate to your CEO or to others that maybe were questioning whether this whole thing made sense at the beginning?
Well, the first thing that he would be interested in the most is the whole integration into Salesforce. So when a customer goes live and is closed won in Salesforce, it automatically kicks off information to Intact, generate an invoice. You know you're going to invoice it on time because when you have high growth and you have Excel, you are going to invoice somebody improperly. It's going to happen. So trying to get that in a more accurate framework. So it's reduced the length of time, it's reduced the number of people that need to touch it. Goes from sales directly into accounting, invoice comes out directly to the client is number one. Probably the second biggest benefit that he would see is the amount of stress on my team that have been working on things. We now can take a step back and start looking at reporting and looking at things going forward. And you can tell just people aren't as worked up and stressed out coming to work every single day trying to get it all done manually.
Sure. Yeah, the reporting piece has
culturally, it's a huge difference.
Yeah, those make sense. Todd?
I would echo, a couple of the same things there. One thing, like us as our group, as we've been growing, we've had to scale. The team still did a really good job of things were still working, but really behind the scenes, we were struggling to keep our head above water. But to the rest of the business, we weren't. When the management team meets, at least I don't think Keith might be able to confirm this, but like it's good to not be an issue point that they have to discuss. And spend time on.
That's generally good.
You don't want to be. There's certain conversations you don't want to be a subject of. And really, it sounds. And I think these technologies have helped keep it that way. So we've got ahead of what would have been issues, whether it was not getting bills out on time, not closing the month on time, not reporting on time, accuracy issues. Other back office processes like expense reporting and stuff like that. People are, things are still flowing as they should, and that's been huge for us. And it's hard to kind of, they're just things that it's hard to quantify it, I guess. We definitely, our team is a lot more lean today than it would be had we not gone in this direction. But yeah, I think those, it's prevented a lot of, we've got in front of a lot of future issues and knocked them off.
That's great. All right, I'm still checking for you. How about adaptive? We haven't talked about adaptive. At Armanino, I will tell you that we did budgeting and forecasting the same way forever in our business for 47 years. And 3 years ago, we switched to adaptive, and it really has made a huge... Hello? You want to talk, Ryan?
I don't want to
talk.
I
talked about it. I already gave you your plug. You don't get to... It's just changed an awful lot for us. I don't know how many people here, show of hands of folks using adaptive. Good. There's a few. Well, I would just tell you, to be able to do planning dynamically, reforecasting, budget to actuals, it is really, I can't imagine how we're running the business without having adaptive. So, that's my perspective. Tell me a little bit about what your guys' experience has been with adaptive, and then I'm going to ask you next, Amy, what your forecasting.
Yeah, the list is very long, so I'll try to hit on what I think are three of the biggest ones. One is, as I said, as the business grew and the way the organization changed and blew up, we've been able to adapt to that very, very quickly and not have to have a huge investment of time into re-architect things. The architecture has grown with us. Last year was our first year where we went from the annual process to quarterly forecasting, and it's the perfect tool for that, because we can make a couple clicks, have another version
relationship person sitting there applying the same controls and processes for that type of work. So I look for that. The other piece I look for is an organization or people within the organization that can be honest with me. I'm a very straight shooter. What you see is what you get, and that's what I want with the person working with me. A cordial relationship, but if we're asking for something we shouldn't be asking for, I expect to be told quickly so I can go find somebody else or figure out why I shouldn't be asking it. So there's an honesty combined with mutual goals that I look for.
And I will add something because you spurred a thought. We've started asking for this more and more with the partners that we work with is hold us accountable. We've got 50 other things that are going on, a lot of other things that demand your attention. When we're missing something, we need our partners to kind of give us like a little wake up call so that we focus our attention on it and don't miss anything and balls don't drop. So.
Yeah. No, that's a hard thing for folks to do, but it's one of the most important things.
And it's hard to.
I tell people all the time, project management is sometimes just having the tough conversation about expectation settings. So, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Any questions I keep going here? I know we only have so much time, so we'll kind of wrap it up here and maybe with a few more questions. Yeah. Please do. Speak loudly though, Amy.
I'll try yelling too. Working with the adaptive.
I'm probably like the biggest culprit of still calling it budgeting, but as I mentioned, we're a year and a half into it. It is part of the business now. That's just how we do things. It's a quarterly forecast. I could talk about how it's evolved here over the last 18 months. Is when we first did this, you gotta pick the happy medium of how deep a dive you take into certain areas. The 3 months goes by really fast, so it can't be this full-on process every 3 months. You got to high level certain areas, and then you might pick certain other areas to drill down a little further into. So we've had to kind of dial things back, move the levers a little bit in some areas, but we're in a pretty good groove right now with it, I would say, and it's working well for us.
All right, so I was having a conversation with someone earlier. We were talking about learning lessons the hard way in life, and why do all the hard lessons come with like a dent in the head, and you go through life and you learn and you move on. So my next question is going to be kind of for the benefit of everyone out here. I'm thinking of this. I'm going to Africa in a week, and I keep asking people who've been to Africa, like, tell me what I shouldn't be doing. And they're like, don't get in the cage with the great whites. That's terrible. Don't do that. So for the benefit of everyone here, looking backwards, what are some of the things that you wish you would have done differently? Some of the lessons learned that other people could benefit from?
Want me to start?
Yeah, either one.
Yeah, I mean, two things that I touched on already, I think, looking back, is one, once you implement something, do something to keep the time freed up for your team so that they can maximize what you've just invested in. Don't move on right away while you're fresh and while you're into this and while you're still learning. Whatever you got to do, whether it's bringing temp resources into the business for 2 to 3 months to handle like some of the daily blocking and tackling, do that and allow your team to make the most of what you just invested in. So that's one. Two, I would say, back to with adaptive is you roll it out to the company, you got all these users in there, and then 6 months later, people are leaving, you're hiring new people, new roles, is to have a game plan from day one, once you roll out, of how you're going to onboard people as they join the business. Those would be the two top three things, I think.
Good. Amy?
I think my single biggest one would have been hiring more resources earlier. Should have hired a controller probably 6 months before we did. Probably should have hired support staff or senior staff accountant 6 months before we did. Again, that
cobbler's children.
Cobbler's children have no shoes. Yeah, not doing a little bit less of that.
That's
We
good.
did the same thing at Grubhub, so I didn't learn my lesson. But anyway.
All right, we have time for a few questions from you. I know this is a smart. We didn't give you enough wine yet, I know, but there's probably a few questions that I failed to ask that you're thinking about. So this is your chance. Anybody with any questions for Amy or Todd? Go ahead. A little louder.
But hey, people move on in their careers. What are you going to do when that person leaves? Who's gonna run that system? So for us, we didn't have that at the beginning. We still don't have it 100% with some of the tools. But that would be like a word of advice I would give there as you move on and do these projects and and move on at post-implementation.
No matter how good the system, no matter how well you automate manual processes, at the end of the day, people still
run them.
Still really matter. Yeah.
I think the two things I would do: understand the scope of the volume of transaction, the size of transaction, the frequency of transaction. You know, Grubhub had 8,000 checks a month that we wrote. We had, you know, twice as much revenue, but we have like a third less clients than SIM partners because it's enterprise. So the transaction volume, matching that to the right scope to understand your staff need, and then also the complexity across the organization. Because the last thing you want to have is just the back office accountant sitting there not talking to anybody else in the company. You need someone that's going to reach across and talk to whatever relevant organization. In our case, it's our client service group that they have to work with every single day. The people that are handling the client and the front-facing work, so that you know what's coming, so you can know how fast you're going to grow.
I was gonna say, Tanya, this is your chance to actually ask questions to someone as opposed to being grilled yourself. So there you go.
Paid for this.
Okay, go on. It's gonna be a hard one.
As you were evaluating technology for your budgeting forecasting tools, and as you will be, what are some of the important things you think we should consider?
Well, I think
What was the question?
As you were, as they were, and as Amy might in the future consider technology for budgeting forecasting tools, what are some of the things that they think of?
So what would I advise you to consider as you're looking for budgeting forecasting technology? I mean, every business has different needs. So obviously, like, yeah, you've got your top 3, top 5 that it's going to have to meet. I think a product that can scale, because even by the time you start the implementation or finish it, your business is going to have changed and you're going to have different needs. So you got to look out as far as you can to find something that can scale. I think the UI, the interface, how easy it is to use is very, very important, because I think especially with some of the legacy systems, people coming off, that's like one of the biggest gripes is like people hate using it. So you have no chance if you go with something that you feel like is going to take a week or 2 weeks of training just to get someone using it for the first time. I mean, I mentioned this as like onboarding these applications. One of the reasons why we missed that is because it was so easy to us. Like we feel like that you introduce it to someone, you give them a little like user guide, 2 or 3 pages, and they're good, and they're going to be off and running. So the interface is really, really important to us.
What are we going to look at? We're going to first look at the level of effort that our organization is having to do a budgeting process, and then the level of understanding on what they can do and how they can change those levers as they go forward. We're going to need to look at our board reporting requirements, because we have some activities coming up over the next 12 months that are going to require a tighter look against budget to understand what's happening when we need it. Probably the 3 biggest. And then it's a cost versus value question.
Always ROI. ROI.
Yeah.
Okay, my final. Oh, we got a couple more. Go ahead.
For us, I would say we're on the leading edge. We're on the front edge of that. So that's really where the business now is really starting to demand us to take all the data we have, whether it's financial or non-financial, whether it's product metrics, things like that, and they want us to process it, put it in, on dashboards, or somehow get it to them and have it easy to read and have it refresh when they want it. So we feel like we're well positioned because we have options. You'd rather have options than no options. So there's a lot of different ways we could go with that, but it's definitely a demand in the business that we're seeing now, and we're going to have to deliver on that soon.
For us, it was easy to get client services. We have 5 major parts of the organization. It was easy to get client services on because they're responsible for invoicing at the end of the day, the correct invoice to the customer, and they get to hear the angry customer when it's wrong. The harder one was sales. So by implementing the joint Salesforce Intech piece, once it goes live and the invoice is created and I push the information back to sales, now salespeople know where to go look up and see when they're going to get commissioned. And that solved that problem immediately. So that got sales on board with the combined 2 systems, and they now will ask the question of client services, when are we going to see this, when is it going to collect, and they can simply point to the report that they're getting that says, here's what I collected for you this quarter, here's your commission check.
Well, for what it's worth, we ask in the annual survey that we do that I mentioned before to CFO organizations what the top 3 key business applications they're focused on. What are the top value applications they're focused on? And number 1 is cloud-based financials. 2 is budgeting and forecasting. So we've been talking a lot about those 2. The 3rd is self-service dashboarding, BI analytics. And really the issue there is transforming the finance organization from being a bottleneck of information, kind of the traditional publish and subscribe model, you having to get the reports out and leverage maybe the IT organization to help with it, to truly more of a self-service model where individuals can go utilize the tools they need, hopefully just about anywhere they need them, to get the information that's going to support managing the business processes that they're responsible for, the business operations they're responsible for. So that is really a huge deal. I thought I saw one more hand. No? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm talking.
As we went through these, and I would say, especially with Intact, because when we did Adaptive was 4 years ago, that's when we could do things without them even noticing, really. Like they probably had no idea we were doing adaptive planning at the time. Intact was one where they knew about it, they were offering help, they expected to play a really large role in the implementation, and they really didn't. It did turn out, we didn't say get the hell out of our way, but it was kind of these like, hey, you can go devote your time elsewhere because we got this one. I mean, between our team and the project managers we had at Armanino, in 3-4 months we were going live. It was.
Well, I had an unfair advantage at Grubhub when we built our integration. I was married to the CTO. So, but kidding aside, Intact CTO Aaron and my husband became close comrades as we built out this integration. Correct me if I'm wrong, it was one of the first bigger ones and probably one of the biggest ones they have due to this volume of transactions that they have. What could IT do? I think, again, back to the phrase, I won't come at you with debit credit language if you don't come at me with by bit, whatever in the heck you're saying language, and we just can work together on how we need to get it done and explain the shortest route to success. Because at the end of the day, if you've got an operating system you've built over here on the internet, it's your site, and you've got an accounting system over here, until they're joined, they're going to be incorrect. And none of us are going to get paid unless we can have good numbers that we all rely on. So, that's kind of the simplest message at the top. How are we going to get that done? But we worked very well, despite being married, getting it done on time. It was not as big an issue at SIM because all of the Salesforce held all the data, and it was more of an integration between Intact and Salesforce.
Thank you. All right, I think we are